Mr. Secretary, the Atomic Energy Agency's report on Zaporizhia is due later today. What do you expect from the agency concerning the nuclear plant?
We expect a clear and unbiased assessment of the situation and the conclusion that only demilitarization of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant can be a safe guarantee of nuclear safety, not only for Ukrainians, but also for Europeans and entire world. Russia must withdraw from Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, period.
Ukraine and Russia have accused each other of shelling Zaporizhia for several weeks now. However, the power plant and the city nearby are occupied by Russian military. Why would the Russians attack their own positions?
Why would Ukraine be interested in destroying the power plant that is connected to its electricity grid and provides for energy security in our country, but also to the sustainability of electricity supplies to the European Union? It goes against the logic. However, Russia is interested in basically disconnecting the plant from Ukrainian grid and connecting it to the Russian grid and taking it under full control. And that was the reason why it increased security risks for the plant.
Can you guarantee that the Ukrainian military is not responsible for any shelling of Zaporizhia in the last few weeks?
Zaporizhia nuclear power plant?
Yeah. Can you guarantee that?
No. We have not been shooting at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant.
Many people in the West would like to see negotiations and a truce between the Ukraine and Russia as soon as possible. President Zelensky, however, said last night the conflict cannot be frozen at this very moment as the Ukraine is reconquering its territory. But what does that mean? That the war cannot end as long as the Ukrainian military is not losing?
It's a very weird way of asking a question, if I may. Are you trying to say you're wishing Ukraine to lose this war?
Of course not. But what does the statement of President Zelensky mean?
It means that my country was attacked. A part of our territory has been conquered by the enemy. And this war will end with the restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity in the same way as it would be the case for Austrian or for any other nation in Europe. You would be fighting for your country, for your people. That's exactly what we are doing. This does not exclude diplomacy. Some parts of Ukrainian territory can be restored through military force, others through diplomacy. But we have to approach the moment of diplomacy with the strongest possible positions.
But you, as Ukraine's chief diplomat, have said in several interviews that President Zelensky is ready to meet Vladimir Putin at any time and negotiate. However, last night on American TV network ABC, President Zelensky himself said Russia is a terrorist state. This is no war, but outright terrorism, and you cannot have a dialogue with terrorists. So obviously he is not willing anymore to negotiate with Putin. Is that right?
The more atrocities Russian army commits in Ukraine, the more aggressive the policy of President Putin becomes, the more difficult it gets to talk to him.
But what does it mean? Would you be ready to talk to Russia now or not?
As I said, we will be ready to discuss with Russia only full restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity. This doesn't seem the case at this moment because Russia continues attacks on Ukrainian cities and continues its ground offensives. Yesterday, they hit with missiles the city of Kryvyi Rih and other places in Ukraine. Countries do not behave like this when they seek negotiations. We are not fools, and we want to see Russian actions aimed at peace, not words that they are ready to talk. Spokesperson to President Putin said yesterday that Russia is ready to talk with Zelensky about the way Ukraine will implement Moscow's ultimatums. This is not how people speak when they want honest negotiations.
But what are the actions you want to see?
First, they have to cease fire, and second, they have to begin to withdraw from the territory of Ukraine.
But do you really think Ukraine can liberate all Russian-occupied territories, including Crimea? Because even people with the greatest sympathy for your country don't expect that.
Even people with the greatest sympathy to my country did not expect that you and I would be talking today, because the plan was that Ukraine would not exist. Optimists, pessimists believe it would take 3 days for Russia to win, and optimists, those who sympathize Ukraine, believe it would take around a week. I'm a Ukrainian. I have my own perception, and so do we as a nation. We will win this war because we fight for our land. We were attacked. We are on the right side of history.
Winning the war means reclaiming all Ukrainian territory, including Crimea.
Absolutely, and I don't understand the obsession of journalists and experts and some politicians with emphasizing Crimea. What makes Crimea different from other parts of Ukrainian occupied territory?
That it has been effectively occupied by Russia since 2014, has been annexed to Russia, has been economically integrated into Russia, and has the most important military station for Russia.
You sound like if you are looking for excuses how to explain why Crimea belongs to Russia, but you are a man of integrity, I'm sure. Listen, parts of Ukrainian territories in the east were also occupied by Russia since 2014. And are we talking, and the question is, are we talking about respect for borders and international law or economic integrations? Does it mean that if you steal something from me and put it in your apartment, this does not belong to me anymore? I don't think this is the case.
I think most people would agree that morally you're on the right side, but realistically, is that an aim you can achieve?
Realistically, I would like to bring you back to the end of February, where many believed Ukraine would not exist by now. We exist, we are alive and kicking, and we know how to defeat Russia because we have no fear. The war taught us not to have fear of the enemy. If other nations in the world would not be afraid of Russia, we would put Russia in its place much faster.
Are there any concessions on the table for the Ukrainian government? Would you, for example, be ready to forgo NATO membership and accept a formal state of neutrality for the Ukraine, similar to Austria's?
I don't think Russia has neither the moral nor the political right to dictate to us how should our domestic or foreign policy look like. Concessions are always an integral part of negotiations, and it would be stupid for me to disclose what kind of compromises can be achieved, but only mutually acceptable compromises. We will not allow Russia to impose its will on us.
More and more people in the West say you, of course, have every right to defend your country and define the aims of the war as you like, but why should the West fight this war with you and suffer from economic sanctions? What do you respond to that?
Because the West understands that if Russia wins in Ukraine, the West will be the next. We are in the same boat. Russia, on 24th of February, Russia attacked not only Ukraine, but also the West. The only difference between us is that while Russia attacked Ukraine with missiles and tanks and kills, tortures and rapes Ukrainians, it attacked the West with inflation, energy prices and propaganda, and causes political instability in the West in the hope that leftist and populist politicians will overtake the rule in those countries and will become more loyal to Russia. This is why the West supports Ukraine, because it understands that this is also an attack on the principles the West is based on and the West stands for.
But there are people and parties in the West who say if the West had not imposed sanctions on Russia, we wouldn't have inflation, we wouldn't have soaring gas prices, we wouldn't have any energy crisis.
These people manipulate reality because the energy crisis began well before Russia attacked Ukraine and the West imposed sanctions in response. Even a simple search on Google will prove to everyone spreading this misleading argument that gas prices started to rise last winter, November, December. That was the time when Putin started to manipulate the gas market in order to create the energy crisis. So we have to stick to the facts to see the truth and not manipulate reality.
I think most people understand why Western weapon deliveries are absolutely crucial for Ukraine. However, how important are the economic sanctions against Russia for the Ukraine?
Well, they definitely make a difference. The only difficulty with sanctions is that it takes time for them to really demonstrate devastating effect on Russian economy. The other difficulty is as long as the West continues buying Russian gas and oil at an artificially high price, Russia can make hundreds of billions of money simply on that to compensate losses from other sanctions. This is why it is so crucial to introduce oil and gas embargo.
You have repeatedly urged for that, but do you still think a gas embargo is on the table in the EU?
I'm absolutely confident that the gas embargo was on the table of the EU years before the Russian aggression began, because all of EU member states signed up for a green transition, and they all committed to getting rid of gas as unhealthy in technology for environment. So what we're talking today is simply about speeding up this commitment. Stop buying Russian gas. You will help not only democracy and Ukraine, but also the environment.
But the green transition you were talking about was meant like for 2035, 2040, 2050. That's not what you have in mind. And speeding up might be a little bit of an understatement on that.
No, I don't think so, because look at the oil embargo. Some countries who claimed that it was impossible for them to abandon Russian oil easily found alternatives. When there is a will, there is a way. If countries want to impose to get rid of dependency on Russia, this is what we are talking to us. Dependency on Russia on gas. If they want to get rid of it, they will find the way. If they don't, they will endlessly drown into debates and discussions.
How worried are you that the so far more or less unified support for the Ukraine in the EU will crumble over the winter as the energy crisis in some countries gets worse?
It's up for national governments and the people of European countries to make their own decisions. We are not interfering into their affairs and not dictating them which government to have in place. We have a war on our soil. We are fighting. We have plenty of things to do. We will accept any choice made by the European nations if elections take place, and we will be working with new governments. But I'm sure that all reasonable governments, whatever their political platform is, will understand that Russia is not a reliable partner. Russia is an enemy and has to be treated accordingly.
The Ukraine is now an official candidate for EU membership. Nobody would have expected that, let's say, a year or 2 years ago. When do you expect your country will be a full member of the European Union?
I have no idea. My job is not to set a deadline. My job is to do all the homework and to convince all the partners to bring deadline closer as possible. That's what we are focused on. We are introducing reforms, aligning our legislation with EU legislation, and we are doing it against the backdrop of the war, by the way. But we understand the transformative power of the European Union, and we will keep doing it. Then what we want is an unbiased assessment by EU members of our achievements, and then will come the decision on membership.